Why did the most powerful military on Earth fail against rice farmers? A muddy rice farmer stands knee-deep in a flooded field. Above him, American helicopters roar overhead. Behind them, waits the most powerful military machine ever assembled. Bombers, napalm, artillery, hundreds of thousands of soldiers. By every military calculation, this war should have been over quickly. It wasn't. 20 years later, America still couldn't win. Not because the United States lacked power, but because Vietnam wasn't the war America thought it was. America didn't lose the Vietnam War because it lacked power. It lost because it misunderstood the war it had entered. From the air-conditioned war rooms of Washington to the muddy rice fields of Southeast Asia, American commanders believed they were fighting a modern military campaign, one that could be won with superior technology, overwhelming firepower, and enough pressure. But Vietnam wasn't asking who had the bigger army. It was asking who understood the battlefield better, who could endure longer, and who was willing to keep fighting after everyone else wanted the war to end. By the time America realized it was answering the wrong questions, the greatest war machine on Earth had already begun to break itself. America's first mistake happened long before the first helicopter landed in Vietnam. It began with a simple assumption. Washington believed Vietnam was another battlefield in the Cold War. If South Vietnam fell to communism, officials feared neighboring countries would fall one after another, a prediction known as the Domino Theory. To American leaders, stopping that chain reaction became a strategic necessity. But millions of Vietnamese saw an entirely different war. For generations, Vietnam had fought to free itself from foreign rule. Chinese dynasties had controlled the region for centuries. During World War II came Japanese occupation. After the war, France returned to reclaim its colonial empire, only to be defeated after years of brutal fighting. When the United States became deeply involved, many Vietnamese didn't see a new protector arriving. They saw another powerful foreign nation deciding Vietnam's future. That didn't mean every Vietnamese agreed. The country was deeply divided, and many in South Vietnam opposed the Communist North and supported the government in Saigon. But for the Communist leadership in Hanoi, and for many who joined their cause, the conflict was framed as another struggle to reunify the country and end foreign influence. America believed it was defending democracy. North Vietnam believed it was finishing a war for national independence. Both sides entered the same conflict convinced history was on their side. And when two nations begin a war believing they're fighting for completely different reasons, they don't just disagree on strategy. They disagree on what victory even means. That misunderstanding would shape every decision America made from that moment forward. If America misunderstood why the war was being fought, it was almost inevitable that it would misunderstand what winning looked like. Every evening, commanders in Vietnam sent reports back to Washington. Enemy soldiers killed. Villages secured. Weapons captured. Operations completed. On paper, the numbers looked encouraging. The United States wasn't losing battles. In fact, American forces usually dominated whenever the fighting became conventional. Superior training, overwhelming firepower, helicopters, artillery, and air support gave them enormous advantages. The statistics seemed to prove the strategy was working. No one embraced that belief more than Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara. Before entering government, McNamara had helped transform the Ford Motor Company by using data to solve complex problems. Numbers revealed inefficiencies. Numbers guided decisions. Numbers produced results. So he brought that same philosophy to Vietnam. If more enemy soldiers were killed than American soldiers, if more territory was cleared, if more operations succeeded than failed, then eventually the enemy would have to give up. Victory, it seemed, was simply a matter of mathematics. But wars aren't factories, and people aren't spreadsheets. For the communist leadership in Hanoi, losing thousands of soldiers did not automatically mean defeat. As long as new recruits kept arriving, as long as supply routes stayed open, and as long as the government remained determined to continue fighting, the war could continue. America measured success by what it could count. North Vietnam measured success by what it could endure. One side believed victory was accumulating numbers. The other believed victory was refusing to disappear. Those two definitions could never produce the same outcome. And that raised an even more dangerous question. What happens when your enemy isn't trying to win battles at all? The deeper America became involved, the stranger the war began to look. Again and again, American forces won the firefights. They captured hills, destroyed enemy positions, forced North Vietnamese units to retreat. Yet somehow, the war never seemed any closer to ending. That was because America had misunderstood the enemy it was trying to defeat. The US military had been built to destroy opposing armies, break enough divisions, capture enough territory, inflict enough losses. Eventually, the enemy surrenders. That logic had worked in many conventional wars. Vietnam refused to follow the same rules. The communist leadership in Hanoi understood something America struggled to accept. They did not have to defeat the United States Army. They only had to prevent the United States from achieving a decisive victory. Every soldier lost could be replaced. Every village abandoned could be reoccupied. Every battlefield surrendered today could become tomorrow's battlefield again. The goal wasn't to win every engagement. It was to ensure the war never truly ended on America's terms. That made every American victory strangely incomplete. A hill captured in the morning could be abandoned days later. A supply route destroyed could quietly reopen. An enemy unit shattered in one province could reappear somewhere else weeks later. To American commanders, this felt irrational. Why accept such enormous casualties? Why refuse decisive battles? Why keep fighting under impossible odds? Because Hanoi believed something far more dangerous than military superiority. It believed America would eventually grow tired of a war with no clear finish. If that happened, the strongest army in the world could still lose. America wasn't fighting an enemy obsessed with winning battles. It was fighting an enemy determined to outlast the war itself. And nowhere did that strategy become more effective than on the battlefield America understood least. For an American soldier arriving in Vietnam, the battlefield looked almost impossible to understand. Towering jungle stretched to the horizon. The air was thick with heat and humidity. Visibility could shrink from hundreds of meters to only a few feet. Every tree seemed to hide movement. Every path looked the same. Every village could be peaceful in the morning and hostile by nightfall. The United States had built its military for a different kind of war. Its greatest strengths were speed, mobility, overwhelming firepower, and the ability to locate and destroy enemy formations. Vietnam denied those advantages one by one. The jungle swallowed helicopters beneath its dense canopy. Artillery could devastate an area without knowing whether the enemy was still there. Bombers flattened forests, only for fighters to emerge later from hidden tunnel networks that stretched for hundreds of kilometers beneath the ground. There was rarely a clear front line. No obvious battlefield. No decisive objective to capture. The Ho Chi Minh Trail was bombed relentlessly, yet supplies continued moving through an ever-changing web of jungle paths, river crossings, hidden depots, and thousands of porters carrying ammunition and food by hand. American commanders searched for an army. Instead, they found an ecosystem built for survival. The battlefield itself protected the people who understood it best. Every river became another obstacle. Every rice paddy became another avenue of approach. Every village became another intelligence network. And every mile deeper into Vietnam forced the United States to fight on terms it had never prepared for. By now, America had misunderstood the war. Misunderstood victory, misunderstood its enemy, and misunderstood the battlefield. It still believed its greatest strength could overcome all of those mistakes, but that belief would soon become its greatest weakness. By this point, America had misunderstood the war, misunderstood victory, misunderstood its enemy, and misunderstood the battlefield. But there was one thing it knew better than any nation on earth: how to wage modern war. If superior strategy wasn't delivering victory, then perhaps overwhelming force would. So America unleashed the full weight of its military machine. B-52 bombers darkened the skies. Thousands of helicopters carried troops into places no army could have reached a generation earlier. Artillery pounded hillsides day and night. Napalm consumed entire stretches of jungle. Agent Orange stripped millions of acres of forest in an attempt to expose hidden supply routes and guerrilla positions. The scale was almost unimaginable. By the end of the war, the United States had dropped more bombs on Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia than were dropped by all sides during the Second World War. No military in history had ever projected this much destructive power so far from home. And tactically, it often worked. Enemy bases were destroyed. Supply depots disappeared. Entire units were forced to retreat. American technology repeatedly proved it could dominate almost any battlefield it could clearly identify. But Vietnam refused to remain that kind of battlefield. A bomb could destroy a jungle today. Tomorrow, new trails appeared around the craters. A village suspected of sheltering guerrillas could be devastated. Weeks later, survivors often returned, not with greater fear, but with greater determination. The harder America struck, the harder it became to separate enemy fighters from the civilians living among them. Military success and political success slowly drifted further apart. Every display of overwhelming power solved one immediate problem, while quietly creating another. America's greatest strength had become trapped inside a war where destruction alone could never produce the outcome it wanted. The war machine wasn't failing because it lacked power. It was failing because power was solving the wrong problem. And while America continued searching for victory through force, another enemy kept growing stronger with every passing month. By almost every conventional military measure, America was extraordinarily successful. When North Vietnamese or Viet Cong forces chose to fight in the open, the results were often devastating. American infantry was highly trained. Its artillery was overwhelming. Its helicopters gave commanders a level of mobility no previous army had possessed. And above them all flew one of the most powerful air forces in history. Battle after battle, American forces inflicted enormous casualties. Many military historians agree that the United States won the vast majority of its major tactical engagements. On the battlefield, the American soldier was rarely defeated. So why didn't those victories end the war? Because they were solving the wrong problem. Again and again, American troops fought desperately to seize hills, jungles, river crossings, and enemy strongholds. Sometimes at tremendous cost. The objective would be captured. The enemy would withdraw. Mission accomplished. Days later, or weeks later, the same area often had to be fought over all over again. The ground itself had never been the real objective. For North Vietnam, every battle had a different purpose. If a position could no longer be held, leave it. If losses became too great, disappear. If the enemy committed overwhelming force, melt back into the jungle, rebuild, and return somewhere else. The question was never, can we win this battle? It was, can we continue the war? That difference changed everything. America was measuring victory one operation at a time. North Vietnam was measuring victory 1 year at a time. The United States kept winning battles, while its opponent kept preserving the ability to fight the next one. The greatest war machine on Earth wasn't being defeated in combat. It was slowly exhausting itself chasing victories that never brought the war any closer to an end. And there was one force quietly making that exhaustion worse every single day. One force America could neither bomb, nor invade, nor destroy. By now, America had solved almost every military problem it could solve. It had deployed one of the most sophisticated armies ever assembled. It controlled the skies. It dominated most conventional battles. Its factories could replace lost aircraft, helicopters, tanks, and ammunition almost faster than they could be destroyed. Yet the war continued, year after year. And that was the problem. America believed wars were won by destroying an enemy's ability to fight. North Vietnam believed wars were won by preserving your own willingness to continue. Those are two completely different equations. Every additional month forced the United States to spend billions more dollars. Every rotation sent thousands of new American soldiers into a war with no clear end. Every casualty returned home to grieving families. Every year, television carried more images of jungle firefights, bombed villages, exhausted Marines, and flag-draped coffins into American living rooms. The battlefield was no longer confined to Southeast Asia. It now stretched into Congress, onto university campuses, through city streets, and into millions of homes across America. Meanwhile, North Vietnam was fighting a different clock. Its leaders accepted enormous sacrifices because they believed one thing above everything else: the Americans would eventually leave. Not because America lacked courage, not because its soldiers lacked skill, but because no democracy can wage an open-ended war forever without convincing its own people that victory is still within reach. North Vietnam didn't have to destroy America's military. It only had to outlast America's political will. That was the war America never realized it was fighting. The greatest war machine on Earth wasn't defeated by a single battle, or a single general, or a single weapon. It was slowly worn down by an enemy that understood the value of time better than anyone else. And when that realization finally became impossible to ignore, the outcome of the war had already been decided. So, how did rice farmers break the most powerful war machine on Earth? Not by destroying it, not by matching its technology, and not by winning more battles. They broke it by forcing it to fight the wrong kind of war. America entered Vietnam believing that superior firepower, mobility, technology, and industrial strength would eventually overwhelm any opponent. Those advantages were real. On a conventional battlefield, they were almost impossible to match. But Vietnam was never a conventional battlefield. Every strength America relied upon became less decisive with each passing year. Bombers could destroy forests, but they couldn't destroy an idea. Helicopters could deliver soldiers almost anywhere, but they couldn't tell friend from foe. Artillery could level a hillside, but it couldn't persuade a population to stop supporting the other side. And every tactical victory demanded more aircraft, more ammunition, more money, and more young Americans sent halfway around the world. The communist forces demanded something much simpler: survive, adapt, return, again, and again, and again. In the end, America's war machine didn't collapse because it became weaker. It collapsed because it was designed to solve problems that Vietnam refused to present. The rice farmers never defeated American technology. They defeated the assumptions behind how that technology was meant to win wars. That's why this conflict still shapes military thinking today. It reminds every modern army that overwhelming strength does not guarantee victory, because history is filled with powerful nations that possessed better weapons, larger economies, and stronger armies. Yet they still lost to opponents who better understood the conflict they were fighting. Vietnam wasn't the moment America discovered the limits of its power. It was the moment the world did. So, why did the most powerful military on Earth fail against rice farmers? Because America entered Vietnam believing wars are won by superior firepower. Vietnam believed wars are won by making superior firepower matter less. 4 years, the United States searched for the decisive battle that would finally end the conflict. It never came. Instead, every bomb dropped, every hill captured, every tactical victory simply led to another day of fighting. The greatest war machine in history wasn't defeated because it became weaker. It was defeated because it was forced to fight a war where its greatest strengths could never deliver the one thing it needed most: an ending. In the beginning, America believed this was a problem that could be solved with enough technology, enough soldiers, enough bombs, and enough determination. But there was one opponent no army could intimidate. No bomber could destroy it. No helicopter could outrun it. No battlefield victory could defeat it: time. And in Vietnam, time wasn't just passing. It was choosing a side. Because history has a lesson every great power eventually learns. History rarely belongs to the strongest army. It belongs to the army that understands the war it is actually fighting.